Welcome back to Santan Solar, your one-stop shop for all your solar needs. I'm going to show how to connect to a loads panel with specifically one inverter, and then I'm going to show how to parallel them with two inverters. The past couple weeks, I've been getting a lot of calls on troubleshooting an inverter, but I always go over hardware first, and a lot of it has been wrong recently. So I want to make a video to clear all of that up so you can watch this video, make sure all of your hardware is correctly installed and properly connected before you give me a call to walk you through some troubleshooting options. Because as long as our hardware is connected properly, software becomes a lot easier. But if hardware is not connected properly, software is an absolute nightmare. So let's get right into it. All right, so the past couple of weeks, I've been getting a lot of calls lately, and every time I get on a call, I always say send pictures of our setup, and starting with our battery connections and our inverter connections. And I think it's about 85% of my calls so far, the connections have always been wrong. So I want to make this video to clear up the air on what we need to do while we are setting up our equipment. So the way I do it is I always start with batteries first, because the batteries are the most important part of your off-grid setup, of course, because it gives us our power. Our solar charges them, but the batteries are going to give us that power at nighttime when there's no solar, or in some people's cases, there's no grid either. So first, I'm going to talk about the rack mount batteries first. The rack mount batteries compared to the wall mount batteries, the only difference is the size. The connections and the wire connections are the exact same. It's sometimes a little bit different depending on your inverter. For example, the 6000XP only has one place to connect your battery cables, but like the 12000XP has four. It has two positives and two negatives. Quickly on that point, if you have the 12000XP, which a lot of people do now, just because they have a lot more features, and their LCD screen is a little bit better than the 6000, right? If I have, let's say I had these two batteries, or if I had, in this case, just one battery, but if I had this battery, I would have two of these cables connected to my 12,000 rather than just one. So that's really the only difference between the two when it comes to connection, like physical connections. When it comes to paralleling batteries, no matter what, that's going to be the same across the board, which I will talk about in just a second. But yeah, when it comes to wall mounts, a little bit different. I will always say to check the documentation, and if you're on the phone with me, I will check the documentation with you. So no worries on that. Let's get on with the video. So when we're connecting our batteries, there are a couple things to keep in mind. There is our communication cable, there is our parallel cable, and our dip switches. Those are the three main important parts, because if those are not connected properly, we're going to get an error on this guy saying our battery's open, our battery's lost connection, no communication failure with the battery. I can put the error codes and warning codes and what those actually are and what to do when you get them. Or you can also check the documentation. You check the documentation to actually go through that yourself, or call me, which I would prefer, to make sure that everything goes fine. So, of course, this is our orange cable. This comes with your inverter. It does not come with the batteries. You get the green cables that come with the batteries. Those are to parallel each battery. But you get this cable with the EG4 inverter. This is probably one of the most important cables. No, you do not have to use this cable. Just want to put that out there. You do not have to use this cable. You just need to have a Cat 6 cable that connects to your inverter there. So, and to add to this, you only need one of these. I've had it multiple times where I've had customers where, let's say they have 3 inverters and 6 batteries, right? They'll have 3 communication cables like this in their CAN ports, which is completely wrong. Only the master inverter needs the orange cable, and only the master battery needs the orange cable. Everything else is going to be a separate thing, right? So with my orange cable, I'm going to connect it to the battery COM port, which is, I'll show on screen now. There's, with the 6000 XP, there is 5 ports, and with the 12,000 XP, you guessed it, there's also 5 ports. So pretty easy, shouldn't mess it up there. Now you might be wondering, well, on my battery, I have 4 ports, even on the rack mounts or the wall mounts. You have your CAN port, your RS-485 port, your BAT COM port, your battery port, or your COM port, except for the outdoor wall mounts. You have 3 ports because your CAN and RS-485 port are the same port, but you still have your BAT port and your COM port. We'll get to that in a second. But so the orange cable will always go to the CAN port. Only on some cases will it go to the RS-485 port, depending on the situation. If you're watching this video because you just bought EG4 equipment, that does not matter. This is what you need. To the CAN port right here. Then you might be saying, Zanon, what else do we do? Nothing. That's it. It's easy as pie. Battery BAT COM port to the CAN port on your master battery, which is your first battery in your line if you have more than one battery. If not, then still put it in the CAN port. Next, what I check for is dip switches. On screen now is going to be the chart of what the dip switches are. But in this case, most people have maybe 1 to, the max I've ever seen is 12 batteries. So really just look at the first 12 dip switches and their positions. So we're gonna check for our dip switches. We're gonna make sure all of our dip switches are in line. And this is before we turn anything on. Remember, the way we do it at Santan Solar is hardware before software. That's how it is everywhere else in the world. We'll make sure all of our connections are proper, and then we can go into the software to the Wi-Fi dongle, which you should watch the Wi-Fi dongle video. Communication cable connected. Our dip switches are in the proper placement. Nothing's on. Those are good, right? And then we have our battery connections. So if we're paralleling, we're going to go from BAT COM, and you'll see that with your green cable that you get with your batteries. You'll go BAT COM. I've seen it go COM BAT, so your COM port. I don't know if you can see this. I'll put an image on screen so you can kind of see what I'm looking at. But I've seen it go COM port to your battery ports. I think that's fine. Again, check the documentation. I've always done it and always been taught to do battery port to COM port. If that's different or if that's changed depending on firmware, then it's changed depending on firmware, right? But as of right now, battery port to COM port with your green cable that you get with your batteries, whether it be rack mount or wall mount. Cool? All right, after that, we're actually make our physical connections with our batteries. So right now I just have 1 battery, but let's say I had 2 batteries. I would always do my negative as on my master, and then my positive to my master, and then my negative to my lowest slave inverter. So let's say I have 6 batteries. My positive that goes to my inverter will be on my master, and then my negative that goes to my master will be on the bottom slave inverter. So if I have 6, my negative will be on my 6 to my inverter. All right, when it comes to turning on these inverters or connecting these inverters, specifically, again, for an off-grid setup with our loads panel, this is my loads panel here. This is how I connect it. So I always do black as L1, red as L2, my white as my neutral, and then green as my PE or my physical earth, right? that will all go to your loads panel. This is not what a normal loads panel is. We actually, if you're here in Arizona, if you want to come see what a system looks like, we actually have a couple in our showroom, which I will show on screen now. So that's how it will look, your loads panel would look, and yeah, cool. So then you might be asking, how do I turn on my inverter? This is the big thing too. Some people forget a couple buttons, and that's why it does an output. So when we're turning on our inverter, we're going to turn on our master battery first, and then all of our slave batteries. So I'm going to turn my BMS on, turn my battery on. All right, I'm at 87%. I'm going to turn my battery breaker on. That's next. I'm not going to touch these yet because I'm going to turn on my LCD screen here. Wait for that to fully turn on. This is where we need to have patience. Patience is the virtue, guys. Battery breaker, power switch. And then you might think, oh, well, next is my load breaker, right? Well, I'm not getting any power to it when I turn on my load breaker, right? Why not? This is the biggest thing I've seen. This button right here, it's right next to your Wi-Fi dongle, even on the 12,000 XP, I believe so. Yeah, on the 12,000 XP, if you're looking at the inverter from the left side, it's on the left side of the dongle, but on the 6,000 XP, it's on the right side of the dongle. I turn this on, and I'm gonna try and film it so you can hear the sound. I really hope you heard that click, because you hear the beep and you hear the click. The click is what turns this on. If I test it for voltage right now, it will give me 240 volts. And if I test one leg here and one leg on a neutral, it'll give me, you guessed it, 120. So that's a big thing. I won't show it because I don't know where my multimeter is. I'll show a picture on screen. Thank you, editing. Then I can see on here, I have my 120 volts. If I turn this on, that's great. And now I can turn my A on. I'll turn my C on so you can see my green light, because now you can see my green light. See? Green light off, green light on. But look at this. Green light's off. It works. I'll even show you. Look at this. So this breaker's on, green light's on. This breaker's on, green light on. Green light's off. There's 3 buttons. Load breaker at your service panel, EPS switch. All right, that's all for this. I'm going to switch over to the bench over here. I'm going to take this guy down and show you how to parallel inverters together. Alrighty, so this is the best place I could get the inverters so you could see both of them. Let me get my cables. So I put the inverters like this so you could see these boards right here. On screen here, I'm going to place an image of how to connect 4 inverters in parallel, but we're going to take this image and cut the middle 2 inverters out and specifically work on as if we're just working with these 2, right? So when you're paralleling your inverters, like we said before, you're going to have your master inverter that's going to have your orange cable in it, correct? Yes. So our master inverter is going to have our orange cable, which I will demonstrate here. This is going to be our master for today. It's not connected to anything. These inverters are on a separate bench, so we're not going to turn these things on because we're not able to. So when you're connecting the master inverter, you're going to take your communication cable. In this case, my communication cable is black. I'm going to take my first communication cable and plug it in to the far left parallel port. There's only 2 of them. It's only these 2. Far left port. Now, this end goes to the farthest slave inverter in your lineup. So let's say I had 2 more in between, just like that photo here. I have master inverter, slave 1, slave 2, fourth inverter, or in this case, second inverter, which is my last inverter in my lineup. So I'm going to place it on this port right here, just like that. So my master inverter and my slave inverter share the end ports. Now, everything in between will go from these ports to this port. There you go. You can see it right there. To this port. These two right there. So once I plug this guy in and this guy in, now these inverters are properly paralleled together. There's no other way to do this. This is the way to do it. The last thing when it comes to paralleling these inverters is to make sure your dip switches are correct. And I'll take these guys out right here so we can kind of see a little bit better. So this is my last inverter. This is my master inverter. Those are on. Everything else in between needs to be off. Other than that, we are good to go. Perfect. So just to recap, we talked about how to connect our battery to our inverter with proper communication, and we also talked about how to parallel 2 inverters and multiple inverters together with proper communication before we get into the software. So thank you for watching today's video. Please like and subscribe. Check out all of our socials. Comment down below, of course. I actually personally read every single one of our comments and make sure we try to get a quick response to every comment.